Almonds are used to combat nausea by my people. Back to antiquity. And if anyone's familiar with Brewer's diet, if you're not, you should check that out, and you work with pregnant women. Small little meals of high protein throughout the day are his protocol for nausea and other issues. And of course, when we think about small protein meals, something happens. There's a spiritual transference of energy when the man's zera, his sperm, enters his wife's body, again, ancestral wisdom here, and starts growing the baby. So everything the man used to nourish his sperm, it's now in the wife's body. And so she also now uses those same foods, the nuts, the eggs, the seeds, to nourish the baby. And of course, quell nausea. So that's fun. Mid-family plants are native to Israel, to the Middle East. And so nana is spearmint, and peppermint I haven't seen, but certainly, it's growable. Lavender, rosemary, okay? Those are all known herbs for nausea, and of course they were used certainly by my ancestors. Not only to eat them or take them as tincture or tea, but also to inhale them. So a little aromatherapy can help. And of course with essential oils, which I covered this morning, I won't go into it. That's a whole other lecture about the debates about essential oils. But just putting a drop of that peppermint or rosemary or lavender on a cloth or something to inhale can also, just the smell can quell nausea. And of course lemon is all over the place in Israel. It's almost like a wild weed too. I have one in my yard. We have our compost right underneath it, and that lemon tree gives us 2 crops a year. It never is without lemons. They might not all be ripe at the same time, but it's got lemons all the time. And of course lemons are used for nausea. The scent of lemon as well as the tea, the peel. Did you have a question? Oh, mosquito. Yeah. It's a mosquito-free zone. Didn't anyone hear what I said? Maybe that's why the lights were on. So I want to come back to almonds too, because almonds are actually really important. The Rambam, does anyone know who the Rambam is? Rambam was a great Jewish rabbi / doctor. He was actually the doctor to the leader of Egypt and beyond. And he wrote a bunch of books about our ancestral traditions with herbal medicine. I need to say, I know you already know, but I need to say it because I just like hearing myself say it. Doctor was an herbalist. That's what that meant back then, because there was no pharma. I know I mentioned that, but I just want to say that again. There was no pharma. Doctors were herbalists. And so he has tons of writing. If you're interested in herbal medicine, there's Avicenna, which is the Arab kind of equivalent, I think, of Rambam. But check out Rambam. Incredible, incredible healer. I was going to ask how you spell that. Rambam. His name is actually longer, but that's kind of like the shortened version. If you look up Rambam, you'll see him. I live very close to his tomb, actually. But he called, this is so cool, because there's so much debate about propriety, is that the word in English? And who owns what ancestral teachings, whatever. But my ancestor, Rambam, wrote all these books and everything for the Arabs that he was serving and for the whole world. And that's really, I think, that was how it was. People from different ancestral traditions, openly, lovingly shared what they learned with one another. And that was making the world a better place. So I'm really grateful that Rambam did that, and you'll benefit from it too if you read that. But Rambam called almonds the best of fruits. And one of the reasons for that may be that when women were not feeling fetal movement in pregnancy, they were told to eat almonds. And that almonds would get the baby moving, and you would know if there was a real problem or not. So that's kind of neat. And almond oil, by the way. So we're talking about, I've been talking about in utero, but a little further on down the line, once you have these herbal children, mother would give almond oil to her children for gas, bloating, upset tummy, and also for coughs and respiratory issues, especially dry coughs. Newborn babies got their first bath being massaged with almond oil or olive oil, both native trees to Israel. That was the first bath, but we'll get to that in a bit. Okay, body aches and pains during pregnancy. My people were farming people, my ancestors. I think probably all of ours were to some degree or another. Like I said, there's a lot of overlap. I can only speak about my people. So my people specifically raised sheep and goats, and that was their meat. That's what they ate for meat, primarily, and milk, goat and sheep milk, which we never eat together, by the way, because it's considered disrespectful of the mother-child relationship to use the milk that was created for the child to eat meat of the dead child together. So in a respect for the sacredness of the mother-child relationship, we don't eat those things together. But all these things, the sheep milk, goat milk, and the meats not eaten together, those are very nourishing things for a mother in pregnancy, as well as the 5 grains of Israel. So that's barley, wheat, rye, spelt, oats are the 5 grains of Israel of my people. And those are very nourishing herbs for fertility. I mean, we all work with herbs, right? So sowing your wild oats, right? For example, I won't go into all of them. Wheat also has a similar connotation to oats. In fact, these 5 grains are so important that we cannot say the after meal blessing unless we've had bread made from at least one of these grains. If I have a meal that doesn't have bread, I don't get to say this whole after meal blessing at all. It doesn't qualify as a meal. It's considered a snack. Even a gigantic rice bowl with a salad and soup and the whole thing. If I don't have bread, that's just a snack. My people know how to snack, So it was so important. It was so important, part of the daily diet, to use one of these 5 grains for health, to promote health. And of course, when my people used to farm and raise their herds and reap the grains and all this, that was a family job. The kids were learning alongside their parents. They were in the field, they were squatting, they were all those things that you use for pelvic health. That was part of it. Where my notes go? All right. Birth. So in some traditions, birth was like a punishment and all this stuff, so women were super freaked out. But that isn't in my tradition. That's not in my ancestral wisdom. I don't know anything about those other ones who say that is. I just know that exists. In my ancestral wisdom, our midrash, our oral history tells us that the women, there were 2 midwives when my people were slaves in Egypt, called Shifra and Puah. Those are kind of pseudonyms, actually. They relate to the Hebrew words for how they related to the babies. So Puah, the word is Puah is like cooing to a baby. So that was what she was known for. She would coo to the new baby. And Shifra is beautifying. She would make the newborn baby kind of beautiful for his parent, whatever that is. I don't know. Put a nice little bonnet on him or her, I don't know. Whatever it was. But Shifra and Puah actually gave testimony that the Jewish women would give birth so fast that they wouldn't be able to make it to the birth. And there's different interpretations, but my people take that very literally. And it makes a lot of sense. women were given the message that our bodies know what to do right from birth all the way on. I mean, these kids are watching the parents reach for these herbs and combat infertility and do all these things. Like, they knew our bodies know what to do. So I think when there wasn't fear involved, probably the births were happening much quicker and much easier. Even now to this very day in Israel, the blessing that you give to a woman who's pregnant is you say, may you give birth like a hen. Because, you know, does anyone else have chickens besides me? Okay. I mean, it's not like a big to-do. They sing a song. They lay an egg. So that's the blessing. And there is song, a lot of song in birthing with my ancestors. That was something that my spiritual leader, my rabbi, told me to do. It's like, make sure you're singing during the birth. Sing, sing, sing. And of course, we know that the throat is connected to the cervix as well. So when the throat is open through song, it helps open the cervix. But anyway, gender roles are very defined with my people. And birth is kind of the epitome of this. Birth is a woman's space, hands down. Men are not invited, men are not there. Men form their own little kind of prayer community where they're praying for the mother, but they're somewhere else. But their prayers, they're supposed to be giving all the spiritual support, the wind beneath her wings, if you will. But she is with her community. Typically, this would be midwives or any trusted females in her family. And whatever she says goes. That's actually codified in Jewish law. A birthing woman, whatever she says, we do. Why? Because she's considered a pekuach nefesh. That means someone who is facing imminent death. And so we can do anything to bring her comfort or to save her. And she stays in that situation for about a week after the birth as well. My people have lots of babies. Probably all our ancestors had lots of babies. Postpartum hemorrhage is the largest cause of maternal mortality, death. And the chances of maternal mortality due to postpartum hemorrhage increase with the amount of children that a woman has. And so my people knew very, very well what to do when a woman is having her 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, so on child. There's an herb that you all know called shepherd's purse or Capsella, I don't want to mess this up, Bursa pastoris, okay? And that's a wild weed in Israel. I mentioned it this morning, I didn't mean to, but I'll mention it again. So, you know. That is used as a tincture. Ancient tinctures were made in wine, by the way. That's how we did it. You tincture the fresh aerial parts of the plant, the whole plant. It's super tiny in Israel. Like if this is the ground, it's like about that high. It's really tiny. And the leaves are super, I don't know if you've seen the plant, if anyone's seen it. There's like hardly any leaves, and there's just a few of them, and they're super tiny. It's just super tiny. You take the whole aerial part, make sure, you know, to responsibly wildcraft this, because if you're in a patch and there's a ton of them, you know, great. You tincture it, and okay, so here's my rule of thumb. This is like for dummies, no offense. I consider myself a dummy, so I like rules for dummies. That tincture is good for 1 year, okay? Now, between us. When your tincture starts smelling off, then it's not good anymore, okay? If you have any doubts, 1 year is your rule of thumb, all right? You should know what it smells like. I think it smells like fresh peas, like a green pea, how do you say it? Green peas,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Green peas.
Okay, all right, so, but you'll smell it when it's fresh. When it starts to smell different, this is a life or death tincture that you're making. This will literally be the difference between life and death. The way it's used is never, ever, 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 ever give it to a woman during labor or the birth. Why? Because it will cause blood clots. You do not want that. That's bad. Only after the placenta is completely out, baby and placenta, should go without saying, is completely out, can you consider giving shepherd's purse by tincture. In general, it's a dropper full of tincture under the tongue. Please, it's beyond the scope of this lecture to know how much blood is too much blood and what's a postpartum hemorrhage. You just have to, you guys, if you're smart enough, you know how to do that. Figure out what's normal bleeding postbirth and what is a hemorrhage, abnormal, okay? But it's one dropper full under the tongue, and that postpartum hemorrhage should stop within a couple minutes. You should see that blood flow slowing down. If in 5 minutes you still have a hemorrhage situation, again, bleeding after birth is normal. So we're talking about an abnormal, a hemorrhage situation. Second dropper full, and be ready to call for medical assistance. Don't exceed 3 dropper fulls. That's, you need to go seek medical attention. My life has been saved by this herb more than once.
Can you say one more time when you would consider giving it, not, of course, during labor or, and you said,
Yes.
repeat that again?
Yes. That, if you've got that, you're like 90% there already. Yeah. Once you've determined that you're dealing with a postpartum hemorrhage as opposed to normal postpartum bleeding, that's on you to figure out what that is. You will administer 1 dropper full of the fresh plant tincture that is less than a year old, or maybe more if it didn't smell off, under the tongue, and you should see that bleeding come down within minutes, 3 minutes. Wait 5 minutes. If you still have a hemorrhage situation, second dropper full, have your hand on the phone, ready to go, seek medical attention, ambulance, whatever it is. If you've got your midwife, it's time to get the Pitocin out, whatever it is, okay? You can try even a 3rd dropper full, probably on the way to a hospital or something like that. No more than 3 dropper fulls. If it hasn't worked in 3 dropper fulls, you've got something way bigger on your hands and you need some other intervention. Does that make sense? It's important. Thanks for forcing me to clarify that. Okay, okay. So much information to cover. I don't even know how we are on time. Does anyone know?